Welcome to Spoken Soul, home of the essential athlete. I'm Terrance, and today we're going to kick off the concept of how we came up with Spoken Soul. So we're going to get a bit into some history lessons and bring you into what it is that we're trying to do with this community. Sitting to my left is the man we call the captain, uh, Mr. Fashionista. Ant Sanders. He goes by many names. Ant, welcome, man.
Thank you for having me, brother. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, Ant is a true legend in his own mind. So before we get into things, we just want to remind everyone that you can always subscribe to the podcast at Spoken Soul. We're on all the platforms where you find podcasts, Spotify, Apple, and all those other good things. So lace up, clip in, and let's get right into it. So, Ant, officially, we started this journey as runners, right? Um, and it's funny because running was one of those things that I didn't have a true passion for in the beginning. But what I want to do is I want to take I want to take everyone back to the beginning of that journey because we've known each other for much longer than we've been running together. But let's go back to we run this town. Let's talk about how that started, why that started, and what was your goal behind bringing all those individuals together in that group.
Well, I think it's a story similar to Spoken Soul. I think about a couple decades ago almost now. We how it actually started was I got back into running because I started boxing, and
I remember that.
yeah,
What was that? Wasn't that place in Attleboro?
there's a place in
Yeah,
Attleboro.
yeah,
Fight to
yeah.
Fitness. Shout out to Rich Gendris, who used to be on the Contender, as a matter of fact. And I started sparring, and I had to do the 3 rounds.
That win was
I
getting
was
you.
winning, and he was like, you should run. And I was like, all right. So I started running, and then I started getting into it, and then I wanted to run the races. But then, once I started running the races, I didn't really see anyone who looked like me. And then we started to try to find running groups that were all encompassing, and they really weren't. So at that point, there were some other people that, shout out to Dave Curry, a couple other people who were involved, and we decided we were going to start our own club that was all inclusive and accepting of everyone, regardless of their color, their race, their sexual orientation. So we were trying to just bring people together, man. Which ended up being, much larger than I ever thought it would be.
Yeah, and that's funny because Dave apparently brings people together because when I left high school, that was the last time I ran. And then, life happens, having kids. And it wasn't until I had Ayla where, age catches up to you. But it was one of those things
Yes.
where she got to an age where she was moving a lot, man. She was
Yeah.
doing all this stuff, and it was tough keeping up with her. And so I was like, I got to do something. I got to do something. So I started doing some little miles, getting out there, and then Dave Curry, he hit me up one day. He was like, "Oh yeah, man, you should come run with the group. You should come run with the group." I'm like, man, I don't know about that, man. I ain't trying to do all that stuff. I ain't trying to do all that stuff. And then I hit you guys up. You guys were doing a run down at Blackstone, man,
Yeah.
and that was I had I ran the furthest I had ever ran that day. I think it was 5 miles.
Wow.
I was like, oh, 5 miles. These cats think of that now, 5 miles.
Yeah.
It got to the point where we wouldn't get out of bed for anything less than 12,
12.
13.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, man, and that I got there. It was you. It was Melissa. It was Angela.
Angela Beast.
Yeah, man, and people were doing their thing. Jolly Rob.
Yeah.
Yeah, yo. And
Rob.
so, I mean, that's what officially kicked off the actual run. And I remember back then, man. I remember the story that Scott told me when he first started. The first time he ran with you, you guys were at Lincoln Woods.
Oh
Yeah.
my God.
He said, "Yeah, you was pushing him. You was pushing him."
Yeah, now you guys are always hazing me. But that, that's the beauty of the community that we've all created, for us all. Courtney and I were talking about that last week, and how just to have, a bunch of individuals that keep you accountable, and that are gonna push you, like we all know each other's strengths and weaknesses and capabilities, and to be able to say, like I can't play with you because you know what I can do and you know what I've done, and when you get out there, you can be like, nah, I know this or I know that, and in an inspiring way too, and not a derogatory way where people are putting each other down, but like, hey man, like I know you could do more. Yeah, we may be a little older, but we know what your potential is.
That
So,
accountability is always
yes,
there, man. That's
yes,
funny. That's funny, Court.
the rest of our crew, man.
Yeah, I mean, the beauty part of we run this town. Well, first off, we used to roll deep. We used to run deep.
You just listen. I came across the photo of CVS. I don't remember what year it was, but it was a CVS, the team photo, where there had to be about 27 of us
Yeah,
in front of the train
in front of the
station.
train station. Yeah, we used to roll deep for
And
those.
we were rolling deep with the CVS. I remember matter of fact, shout out to you. I remember, and when we go down memory lane at some point. I remember when I was telling you about things I wanted to do, and hell, we was even out at them charity runs putting in work.
Yeah,
I think it was
yeah,
the Gloria Gemma.
yeah.
It might have been
Yep.
when I got my PR for the 5K. So it's the beauty of, and we did great things too. Not only did we develop a community that was running, we developed a community that was for the community because we were doing food drives.
Yep.
We were doing coke drives. During the Christmas time, we were adopting, families
Yeah.
to
Mm-hmm.
help. Like we did some really great things that went beyond running, and I think that's the beauty of the community and what hustling can bring for you. So, and I'm very proud of that. I mean, the numbers may have dwindled over the years, but I think the essence of it and the spirit of it is something that I don't think I haven't seen any other organization be able to replicate that.
Yeah, and before we switch over to how we got into the cycling piece, I wanted to touch on that because, you know, the relationships, that community, it was such a great feeling being a part of those. But when we talk about community and giving back, yeah, there was adopting the family, the charity runs, all those things, coat drives, all those things. And then a big part of that was giving back to the running community with the
Yes.
whole volunteering for all the races. I mean,
Yes.
we've we have some stories from volunteering at those races, and I think
Man.
one of the greatest joys is being able to be on the other side
Side. Yes.
and to support and cheer on, because that's the thing too, particularly at the running events, the amount of people who come out and support and
Yes.
cheer and volunteer. I mean, I think that's just phenomenal. I think that's one of the things that has always kept me close to the running community, even though, I mean, again, from a size perspective,
Yeah.
things did dwindle down a little bit,
Yeah.
but that passion that the people display, whether or not they're just done, whether or not they're just running or volunteering, is crazy. So now you start this running group, and there were, I mean, a lot of people out there
Deep.
running deep. I mean,
Deep.
if you remember, the ladies would start doing their
One
own
thing. Yep. Yep.
and we would still do those Sunday runs,
Sunday runs. Yeah.
but we would catch up. But Then, for one reason or another, you said running wasn't enough. So walk me through that journey that took you from runner to triathlete, getting in that water, and then picking up the whole cycling piece.
All right. Well, first off, I want to say shout out to to Kathy York because she's always on that fuck that swim shit, which is funny. But how I transitioned was, and I don't really believe it was like more of enough, but I think as athletes and specifically as runners, like we chase highs. You know,
Yep,
whether we,
true.
we chase highs and we chase challenges, and they sometimes like intersect.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jolly Rob was I don't even know how he got into it, but he had done like a couple of triathlons, and he kept trying to like reel me in. Oh man, come on, you should try it. Da, da, da. I'm like, I'm not getting in the water. Like, like I could bike, like I would do the duathlon. So finally I was like, you know what? I'm gonna try it. I want to try it because at least if nothing else, I always knew how to swim, but I wasn't the best swimmer. But I figured, it'd be a good way to kind of try the whole endurance thing and take it to another level.
Yeah.
So for me, that's what it was. It was the challenge, and it became addictive too. So, I did one. And shout out to Try Mom. That was the first one that I did. Where and again got introduced to another community, and I just dipped my feet into that, and then it just became addictive too because it was like how like everything else, how much can you push?
Yeah, yeah.
Like how much can you endure too? So, and I'm thankful for that too because I think, and we'll talk about that in later episodes. But I think, the things that happen sometimes you don't understand why they happen, and some of the things that you don't think you need at some point, you end up needing them later.
Yep.
Thinking back, when I got into the triathlon world, I didn't know I was going to need it later on in life in the sense that they say that most runners become bikers because their body breaks down. So I was able to, by getting into that cross training section early, as I transitioned into my older, I guess midlife years, I was able to balance it off and,
Yep.
and actually probably able to be able to extend my running life because of that.
Yeah, and so it's funny you mentioned that. So the transition from the run to the ride for me came with, again, I was beating them streets up, man, from a running perspective,
Yes.
and it was one of those things where I was pushing myself, and as I pushed myself, I was getting those results, and I was like push, 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 and then going from not, I hadn't ran in so long to pick it back up and to have it not just be a passion, but for it to be a release, right?
Yes.
For stress and the day-to-day stuff. I started hitting that very, very hard. And the other part about that, well, not the other part, what I wasn't doing was from a physical perspective or from a workout perspective, I wasn't doing a whole bunch of cross training.
Yes.
And I ended up having some issues with my back. And they said I couldn't run for a while. And so because I couldn't run, I said, well, let me see what this bike thing is about. Actually, and you was like, oh yeah, you should get a bike. And I ended up getting a bike.
I needed you guys at that point too, because right at that point when you were doing that, like when you came into that, that's when I started to pick up the intensity of what I was doing with the triathlons as far as the distance wise.
Yep. Yeah.
So and I think like right around that point in time, I think I went up from the sprints to the Olympic triathlons, and that's when like I needed to ride more. So that was like perfect timing because prior to that I had and Court had mentioned that too because when we were running last week, he was talking about how like prior to that I was riding, but I was riding for like the distance, and I wasn't riding for the performance piece that I would need to go up to move up and transition. So that was perfect for me. That was perfect for me.
Yeah. So I remember you was like, I'll get a bike, and then I went and looked at the bikes, and I tell you what. Looking at the bikes is what really got me into cycling because again, you go in there and it wasn't like the old Huffies, you know what I mean? They had these sleek machines and you look at them like, oh yeah, that's hot. All these different color designs and all those other things. And what was crazy was, as I started to cycle, I started to actually enjoy that. And I think a big part of that was, you know, when we started doing we started running together again. There's that brotherhood, there's
Yeah.
that community. Some of that stuff transitioned over to cycling. A big reason
Yes.
for that was we were doing it together,
Yes.
and it was one of those
Yes.
things where, all right, well, we might not be running, but
But
we're
we're cycling.
cycling, and we're
Yep.
still actually doing it together. And
Yep.
so, for
And
me, it was natural from the perspective of it's just as
yes.
it's just like it was when we were actually running.
Yes, it was the same approach, and I'll say also you hit that right on the head. It was almost like when we were kids. When you would grow up and then you would do certain things and you do it with your friends and that's how you got it. You got it and that was your bonding moment and it was exactly that
Yeah.
way. I'll say this, and I'm saying it officially. Like you got us all into like the trouble with the bikes too, because like right at that point, I mean, and you took it to another level. And again, us all helping each other to where, like that. And I'll say that that's been your forte, for us, which I've appreciated that, like making sure, like in that biking space that, that we would learn about, maintaining your bike, about the performance pieces of that. I've always appreciated that, because that's been something that, transitioning over from running to cycling isn't always necessarily, an athletic thing. Sometimes it's about, it's about the machine. But like you always say, the person that drives the machine, but making sure that the machine is intact and that you care for it and your tires, and even your little cloth that you have when you're like, oh, you got to clean your bike
Yeah.
off and all that. So that has been, and I've appreciated that and I've appreciated, again, with all of that, it's always been a community thing where, we've all learned from, and again, little things that you may not take into account, but like I remember there was one year like when we were riding when it was cold. We went with the toe covers.
Yeah.
We went with the toe covers, and then there was at one point in the time we were riding in the summertime, and we never wore like the sun sleeves, so that was something where we had learned about that. And then even down to the technology piece where, and I was talking to you about this prior to us even recording about even like the technology piece with the radars for the car backs and those type of things. So I've appreciated that. I think that's great that we've all tried to teach each other and stay as a community and grow. And I think that that's exceptional. That's one of the things I think that kind of for me keeps me going. In addition to whatever my own self passion is, but to know like one more motherfucking T, one more my motherfucking T is gonna be what it is, and how that's transitioned from, and it's funny about how the whole 360 of it goes. Like we all have, and that's the beauty, and I know you'll talk about that later, but that's the beauty of the community where, we have these interchangeable pieces where everyone fits in and does their own little role to make sure that it stays connected and it stays complete. And that's beautiful, that's
Yeah.
beautiful.
It's funny you mentioned that. So that stuff when it comes to the bike, really, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a bit of when it comes to those. I got a problem when it comes to the bikes, but at the same time, safety is a big part of that.
Yes. Yes.
I did an audio episode on safety for both running and cycling when you're out there on the road. But those checks are important. I mean, when you go from getting on your bike and riding 5 miles
Yeah.
to where you're doing 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, a century, you know what I mean? You need to make sure that before you go out there, you're doing those checks and making sure that you ain't going to break down. If you remember, there was a particular ride and we weren't riding with them, but we came across this group
Yeah.
and
I
homeboy's chain broke.
no, I got a funnier story than that.
Well, what?
I got a funny story than that. Do you remember? And you talk about safety check, and I think you had clowned me about that. We were riding. I think it was in Seekonk, and we're riding up the hill. We may have probably only been like 2 miles out, and I think I'm a little bit ahead, and I just fall, boom, and you're like, "What happened?" And we're trying to figure out what happened.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know what happened. And then you're like, oh, because you are the tech guy that checks all the stuff, and you're like, the wheel came off, and was sitting there thinking, and I'm like, I'm like, I didn't check my bike, and I'm like, and I said, I remember my daughter was in there playing with playing with it, but I don't normally check it because I check it, the night before, and I leave it, and I just go and do what I got to
Yeah.
do.
Hmm.
So that is, you know, that's a great story about, about being ready, and about making sure that you check your safety with that. And I think, not from a safety perspective, but also, about being prepared too. Another personal story I remember, and I'm still mad at this. I think it may have been the last century we did
Hmm.
when I got caught out there. and,
Yo.
and we started carrying. I think my tire and my tube went, and I didn't have an extra tire. And I think that was after that when we started doing the centuries that I got two spare tires. And it's funny because now whenever we go over 50, I make sure that I have that tire in my safety bag. So you're absolutely right about that. And also just being able, not just from a safety perspective, but also just from a performance perspective too. Because if you have those things and those things are in check, it makes the hustle easier. With all the gear, whether that be your running shoes, whether that be your bike equipment, and I know it's only spoken soul, but even from a triathlon perspective, with having the right equipment in terms of, like, I don't swim without a wetsuit, so all those things.
Yeah, and you know what? The thing with that is the community helps with that, right? Because when
Yes.
you first get into these,
Mhm.
you might not know all of that stuff. What's the right equipment, how you
Yep.
care for them, and things like that. But I know one of the first things you used to do when you got a new pair of shoes, you spray them.
Spraying them. Yep.
You
Yep.
was all about spraying them,
I still listen.
protecting your
I
investment.
still spray. Listen,
Yeah.
I still, and it's so funny that um my son does it now. He brings me his shoes. He's like, you still doing it? He's like, yeah, Dad, I gotta spray them. And I'm like, yeah, and that's important too, just because we know what we go into, and like nothing stops to run. That was one of the things that we had.
Yep.
So one of those things before we ended up running into the shields. Shout out to Nike. Can we get an endorsement, Nike? But prior to coming into the shields, we ran in everything. So, it wasn't just to protect, them staying in shape, but it was some of those repellents would repel water. So it would be good when, like when we ran and we ran in the thunderstorms, whatever else, and getting caught
Nothing
out
stops
there.
the run.
So that was good to be able to have that equipment, the right equipment, so that, and I think you said it, and I don't know if you ever remember saying it, but I recall you at one point saying, if you got your equipment right, you got no excuse not to get out there and do what you got to do.
Yeah, and the thing with that is, so all of that comes back to, you know what started that for me? The yak tracks. Because you think about it, right?
Yes.
The yak tracks, when it's out there, and when you're out there and snow's on the ground, a little bit of ice, you don't want to go out there and break your neck.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can do certain techniques to make sure that you don't fall and hurt yourself. But it all comes down to this: if you got the right equipment, then you can get out there and get it. And it started with the running, and then when the cycling came around, it just carried over to the actual cycling. Now, um, with the cycling pieces, it's a bit more because you got to be concerned with a little more.
Yeah.
Whereas running, I mean, you got your shoes, you got your layers. You know what I mean? Depending on what the road is like, you got your yak tracks, you got your hydration. You know,
Cycling,
you you good to
cycling,
go.
cycling's much more intricate.
It is, yeah.
Like it's much more intricate. And again, and even shout out to all, to my crew. Especially you. Like I think, you, and I said it earlier. I'll say it again. Like you can get away with a lot more in athleticism and running, but when you get to cycling, and I'm not, shaming anyone, but you see guys out there that are some big boys out there that can push them pedals, and they don't look like they're kind of the athletic type, but it's all in the strategy and knowing the machine and your mind frame with it too. So it's definitely a challenging sport. I love the sport. I've come to love it more as I've gotten older, and as we've gotten more into it, because I learned to appreciate like what it can do for your body, whether
Yeah.
and how they can. You said it earlier, how they help each other out. You know, we were talking before we got on the show, and when I rode yesterday, and I ran, I did a double tap. You'd be proud of me. I ran in the morning, and then it was so nice. I rode in the afternoon, but um, the riding felt exceptionally well because of some of the things that we've all talked about, and that, like, we gotten a chance to incorporate. Like, you put me on as Zwift. I was heavy into Zwift, and being able to get out there and like kind of see the return on investment. Again, I'm
Yeah.
not. Am I gonna run any races? Hell no. But to be able to see, those little, the builds and the gains in performance is something that's again, it's what we chase.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
what we chase.
Yeah, and in regards to what we chase too, a big part of that is, we're chasing mental release, right? So when we
Yes.
talk about whether it's running or cycling, and this whole spoken soul thing, a big part of us wanting to do this was to make sure that from an enthusiast perspective,
Mm,
you know, we build a place that is accepting
yes.
of everyone, right?
Yes.
And whether it be running a 5K,
Yep.
half marathon, marathon, you're running your own race. Same
Yep.
thing with the bike,
Yep.
right? The bike is more intricate, but at the same time, you know, too many times people look at someone and they
Mm,
judge a book by the cover.
yep.
And that's one of the things that we wanted to try to actually
Yes.
avoid.
Yep.
But again, it all comes down to the community,
Mm,
us being there for each other, us, helping each other out,
mhm.
us holding each other
Yeah.
accountable, and those stories, man. I mean, that's another big part of this, man. Being able to actually create more stories
And
that,
memories.
yeah,
And
stories and
stories,
memories.
stories and memories. And again, like, you got me thinking right now, like, even with the cycling, with the with the Dr.
Oh
Pepper
man,
hits. So like, and again, as you learn and you go for, and I think one of the things I want to circle back to is, like you said, is acceptance. I think, in this world of division that we have and a lot of different things, I think the one unifying thing has been the sport. To be able to
yeah,
say, and especially since, we're not, we're middle-aged athletes compared to what we were 10, 15 years ago. So to be able to mature into the sport and to be able to say, even with those people that are coming in, that may be a little bit younger, to kind of get them to where it's a great feat to just say, hey, you ran 1 mile
yep,
or you ran a half mile. All those individuals are doing more than most people that are just sitting on the couch, you know, giving their scenario and their opinion on what someone else is doing. And again, I think that's what I love about what we're trying to build and where we're going, because I know, for a time, and I'm not going to talk about the running piece, because I will say runners are much more nicer than cyclists. Cyclists are snobs.
so,
Um,
so I've been thinking about that too, right? And you know, here's what I will say. Sometimes you only know the people who are around you,
yes. Okay.
and that's that goes into also why we're trying to build this community.
Yep.
In my experience so far, most runners who I come in contact with have been phenomenal. And when I say phenomenal,
Yep.
what I mean, I'm not talking about from a excuse me, from a performance perspective, but I'm talking about from a social perspective, from an
Yes.
interactive perspective,
Yes.
from a community perspective, from a volunteer perspective.
Yes.
They have been phenomenal. And I have come across some people in the cycling world who have been looking for
Yes.
some people to be
Yes.
phenomenal. And what I
Yep.
mean by that
Mm-hmm.
is I've experienced certain situations where a cyclist will be judged based on the type of gear,
Bike.
whether it be bike,
Yeah.
whether it be, the
Kit.
attire, the kit. Yeah, exactly.
Gloves.
And and that has turned some people
Yes.
off. I've also been a part of certain situations. Well, let me say this. Well, I'll get to it. I've also been a part of some situations where someone new has shown up to a group ride, and the expectation was that they'd be taken care of, it'd be a no drop ride, and that stuff not happen. On the flip side, I will also say this, and this is why I say sometimes the people you know. I have been a part of some group rides that have been phenomenal,
Mm.
where
Yep.
the whether it be the store or the group or whoever puts on the actual ride sticks to what they say
Yes.
they were actually going to do.
Mm.
So I think there are two sides of the coin.
Yes.
Unfortunately, many of the situations that I've been in have been towards the negative. But
Yes.
again, that's why, we're here to try to build this community.
Yes.
So individuals who are looking to get into, I'm going to say, the sport, the
Yep.
activity,
The activity.
the
Yep.
community,
Yep.
can find a place where they're going to be accepted regardless of whether or not they have a $300 bike
or
or
$3,000
a
bike.
$10,000 bike.
Yep. I agree. I agree because I think at the end of the day, it's about it's about the fitness piece and it's about the health aspect of it. That's most important and what they're going to gain from that. And I agree. And I'm excited about that. And I think, we got a chance to do that at the end of last year or it started to heighten a little more. We were kind of pulling in, people and they wanted to be a part of it. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's about. It's about community.
Yeah.
I think, I tell people all the time, yes, I could ride. Like I rode yesterday, I ran yesterday, and that's all fine. I'm not saying there's anything away from that, but the community and the connection with all you have made it so much more enriching than it would be, and again, even with the memories. And I think we're going to talk about, at some point memories, but like I got tons of memories with you all.
Yeah,
Good.
I remember the first time I remember the first time. It's funny. I remember the first time I fell on my bike. I remember the first time I fell on my bike when we were together. It's crazy. And the funny thing about that is the first time I fell on a bike we were together, we were actually stopped at a light.
Stopped at a light, yeah. And even that too. And even again, I think the community also, when you're in a community setting, it teaches you how to not take yourself serious.
Yeah.
I remember a couple, and we're horrible for it, but when people have crashed,
Oh yeah.
and we made sure they were okay, but again, there was a fun, and again, it's a story it's a connection to it. And but again, I think at the end of the day, you know, um, and I'm definitely aging myself, but I don't know if you remember that book that they used to have us read back in the day. It was called People Need People. And
I don't think I know about that
okay,
one.
I want you to Google that. People Need People. It was a book that they used. I think it was in middle school, and that was like one of the collections of books I think they had for social studies, if I'm not mistaken. But I always think about that as I think about like people need people, and it's not just the connections you make are not just about the sport. It's about life. It's about we make connections, but and yes, we ride, we run, and all of that. But we've been able to build and develop relationships outside of that deal with life and deal with the things that you have to go through life. That sport has been able to bring us that connection to help us cope with that. So that's amazing. And again, I think again it just comes back to people need people, man. And it's kind of like a 360 thing that just keeps
Yeah.
feeding and feeding and feeding and feeding off of each other, which humans weren't meant to be alone,
Yeah. So I haven't heard of that book, but I mean, I think that's a great segue through, excuse me, to the fact that this is all about building relationships. This is all about being able to find a home for those individuals who have been looking for a place, whether it's running or cycling, to say, hey, listen, I can go there. And when I go there, there are a couple of things that I know I'm going to get. One, you're going to laugh. You're going to laugh. Particularly with this group of individuals. You're going to
Yes.
laugh. You're going to be accepted,
Yeah.
and you're going to find that community because, again, like you said, we have so many relationships that we have built that have transcended the sport of
Yes.
running and cycling. And they're people who you can call on, people who you know that if you need anything, they'll be there for you. And at the same time, They're going people who they're people who are going to make you laugh
Yes.
when not only you expect it, but when you least expect it. And I think that's what the idea behind all of this is about.
Yes, and when you need it. And when you need it.
Yes.
You know, we've all gone through, you know, different I want to say challenges in our lives where you know, and I know, and I'll say for me personally, you know, where, you know, I've had, you know, things that I had to deal with in my life, and to be able to show up and, and if nothing else, I could get a laugh. In addition to the support.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's, you know, that's what we're trying to build. We're trying to build and a safe space where you can come and you don't have to feel like, you know, you need to be an expert. You know, just show up. You know, you show up. You know, and I think that's one of the things I think we've done a great job is to say, just show up and try your best and have fun.
Yeah.
You know, because you know, with the sports as well, you know, sometimes, and we know, and I hope we revisit that at some other thing, but you know, we know how you can put in so much work that it becomes a job, and you lose the fun and joy of it. And I think that's something that, you know, what we're trying to, you know, what we're trying to create. So, and I'm excited for it.
Yeah. So I'll sum this up with two phrases. One that we use on the running side, and I'm sure you'll remember this one, and one that we use on the cycling side. I'll start with the cycling side first. Just ride.
Yeah.
Just ride. Your ride, your journey is your journey. Don't compare yourself to someone else. Again, we're talking about building a community here. Yeah. And on the running side, run the mile you're in.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Run the mile you're in. Don't think about, you know, the person who may go past you. Don't think about the person who might be faster than you. Don't think about the person who's logged more miles than you. Run the mile you're in. You are your own competition. And that's what I envision this whole community being about. So with that being said, we're going to finish up on there. Again, remember, subscribe to the channel. You can find us on all the platforms. Thanks for watching. What's good, everyone? This is Terrance from Spoken Soul. We're just getting things moving. We got a lot of stuff in store for you guys. So if you want to be part of the community, please be sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell so we can keep you up to date on everything we got going in the draft. Thanks, and we'll see you soon.